gonna survive.
In today's video, we're diving into the mysterious and thrilling world of The End of Oak Street, a 2026 science fiction survival film that brings suspense, emotion, and unexpected horror all together in one gripping story. If you love movies that slowly build tension and keep you guessing till the very end, then this one is definitely for you. In this video, we're going to break down everything you need to know about the film, from its performances and direction to its unique concept and execution. We'll start with a detailed review where we'll talk about what works in the movie, what doesn't, and how well it delivers on its promise of suspense and survival. After that, we'll explore the deeper meaning behind the film by discussing its moral and the hidden themes that make this story more than just a creature survival experience. And that's not all, because the most exciting part of this video is coming right after that. We'll go into a full, deep dive explanation of the movie's complete story, where we'll break it down scene by scene so you don't miss a single detail. From the strange beginning to the intense climax, every moment will be explained clearly and in depth. So make sure you watch this video till the end, because things are going to get intense, emotional, and absolutely mind-blowing as we uncover the secrets behind The End of Oak Street. Let's get started. The End of Oak Street, directed by David Robert Mitchell and starring Anne Hathaway, Ewan McGregor, Maisy Stella, and Christian Convery, is a bold and unusual science fiction survival film that blends suburban family drama with prehistoric chaos in a way that feels both ambitious and unpredictable. The film begins in a quiet, seemingly ordinary neighborhood, where a family is already dealing with subtle emotional tensions and personal struggles, but everything changes when strange, unexplainable events begin to occur around them, slowly breaking the sense of normalcy and replacing it with fear, confusion, and uncertainty. As the story unfolds, the neighborhood itself appears to shift into a mysterious environment where prehistoric creatures begin to appear, turning a safe suburban setting into a dangerous survival zone. And this transformation is not just physical, but also symbolic, representing how quickly stability can collapse when faced with the unknown. One of the film's strongest aspects is how it builds its story with a slow and atmospheric approach rather than rushing into action, allowing the audience to connect with the characters and feel the tension grow naturally, Although this pacing may feel too slow for viewers who expect immediate thrills, director David Robert Mitchell brings a unique vision to the film, using a mix of retro-inspired visuals, eerie silence, and surreal storytelling techniques to create an almost dreamlike experience where reality feels unstable and unpredictable. In The End of Oak Street, the performances of the cast play a crucial role in grounding the film's highly unusual and surreal concept, and overall, the acting is one of the strongest elements that keeps the story emotionally engaging even when the narrative becomes chaotic. Anne Hathaway delivers a deeply committed performance as the emotional core of the family, portraying a mother who is not only trying to protect her children from physical danger, but is also struggling with internal fears, anxiety, and the pressure of holding her family together in an increasingly unstable world. And her performance feels natural, layered, and emotionally believable, especially in the quieter moments where fear and vulnerability are expressed through subtle expressions rather than dialogue. On the other hand, Ewan McGregor brings a calm yet conflicted presence to his role, playing a father who is trying to maintain control and rationality in a situation that defies all logic. And while his performance is more restrained compared to Hathaway's, it effectively reflects a character who is slowly losing certainty and confidence as the situation escalates. Although at times his emotional arc feels slightly underdeveloped due to the film's uneven pacing. Maisy Stella adds depth to the story by portraying a teenager dealing with both the chaos outside and her own personal struggles, and her performance brings a sense of realism and relatability, especially for younger audiences, as she captures the confusion, fear, and emotional conflict of growing up in a world that suddenly makes no sense. Meanwhile, Convery stands out with a surprisingly strong performance for a younger actor, delivering moments of innocence, fear, and courage that add emotional weight to the film, particularly in scenes where the danger becomes immediate and personal. The chemistry between the family members feels authentic, and their interactions help create a believable emotional foundation, which is essential for a film that relies heavily on character-driven tension rather than constant action. However, despite the strong performances, some characters in the film are not given enough development, which makes certain emotional moments feel less impactful than they could have been, and this is more a result of the screenplay and pacing rather than the actors themselves. Overall, the cast of The End of Oak Street delivers solid and convincing performances that elevate the film, making it easier for the audience to stay invested in the story, even when the narrative becomes inconsistent. And while not every character is fully explored, the main performances successfully carry the emotional weight of the film. One of the most talked about aspects of The End of Oak Street is its visual presentation, including VFX, cinematography, and overall visual design, which play a major role in bringing the film's unusual concept to life. And while the film is undeniably ambitious in this area, the results are a mix of impressive highs and slightly uneven execution. The visual effects, especially the creation of prehistoric creatures and the transformation of a normal suburban neighborhood into a surreal, dangerous environment, are at times visually stunning, with certain scenes delivering a strong sense of scale, realism, and tension that truly immerse the audience in the chaos. And in these moments, the film successfully captures the feeling of wonder and fear that defines great sci-fi survival cinema. However, not all VFX sequences maintain the same level of quality, as some scenes feel less polished, with noticeable inconsistencies in texture, lighting, and integration with real environments, which can occasionally break immersion, especially for viewers who pay close attention to technical details. Despite this, the film deserves credit for its creative visual ideas, as it doesn't rely solely on spectacle, but uses its visuals to enhance the story's atmosphere and emotional tone. The cinematography is another strong element, with the director David Robert Mitchell using a combination of wide shots, slow camera movements, and carefully framed compositions to create a sense of isolation and unease, making even familiar suburban locations feel strange and threatening, and the use of lighting, especially during nighttime or fog-filled scenes, adds to the eerie, almost dreamlike quality of the film. The color palette shifts subtly as the story progresses, moving from warm, natural suburban tones to darker, colder shades that reflect the growing danger and emotional tension within the story. And this visual transition is handled effectively, even if it is not always consistent throughout the film. Overall, the visual experience of The End of Oak Street is both ambitious and creative, delivering several memorable moments that stand out, even though the inconsistency in VFX quality prevents it from reaching the level of perfection seen in top-tier blockbuster films. But still, it remains a visually engaging and stylistically unique part of the movie that adds significant value to the overall experience. Another crucial element that significantly shapes the overall experience of The End of Oak Street is its music and sound design, which together play a powerful role in building tension, enhancing emotion, and immersing the audience in the film's unpredictable and often unsettling atmosphere. Unlike many modern science fiction or survival films that rely heavily on loud, constant background scores, this film takes a more controlled and atmospheric approach, where silence is used just as effectively as music, allowing moments to breathe and tension to slowly build in a more natural and psychological way. The background score is subtle yet haunting, often driven by low ambient tones, soft synth layers, and minimalistic compositions that gradually intensify as the danger increases, creating a feeling of unease that stays with the viewer even during quieter scenes. And this approach aligns well with the film's slow burn storytelling style established by director David Robert Mitchell. In emotional moments, the music shifts into a more melodic and restrained form, gently supporting the characters' internal struggles without overpowering their performances, which allows actors like Anne Hathaway and Ewan McGregor to fully express their emotions without distraction, making key scenes feel more intimate and impactful. At the same time, during high-intensity sequences involving prehistoric creatures, the sound design becomes far more aggressive and detailed, with carefully crafted effects such as distant roars, heavy footsteps, environmental destruction, and layered background noises that make the danger feel immediate and real. And these elements are often more effective than the visual effects themselves in creating fear and urgency. The use of spatial sound, where audio moves across channels, adds depth to the experience, making viewers feel surrounded by the environment, especially in scenes where characters are being hunted or are navigating through unfamiliar terrain, and this contributes greatly to the film's immersive quality. However, similar to other aspects of the film, the audio design is not entirely consistent, as there are moments where the balance between music and dialogue feels slightly off, causing certain lines to be less clear or impactful. And in a few scenes, the score may feel too restrained, reducing the emotional intensity that the moment requires. Despite these minor issues, the film's overall approach to music and sound design is thoughtful and effective, prioritizing atmosphere and emotional depth over constant stimulation. And this choice helps distinguish The End of Oak Street from more conventional films in the genre. Ultimately, the soundtrack and sound design work together to create a layered auditory experience that supports the film's tone, enhances its suspense, and deepens its emotional impact, making it an essential component of what makes the movie both engaging and memorable, even if it doesn't always reach its full potential in every single moment. The End of Oak Street unfolds its narrative in a slow, layered, and deeply atmospheric way, gradually transforming from a grounded suburban drama into a full-scale survival nightmare. And the film's scene-by-scene progression is designed to keep the audience both emotionally invested and constantly unsettled. The opening sequence introduces us to the family at the center of the story, living what appears to be a normal life in a quiet suburban neighborhood. But even in these early moments, there are subtle hints that something is not quite right, as the film uses small visual cues like unnatural silence, slightly off timing and background activity, and a lingering camera that holds on empty spaces just a bit too long, creating a sense of unease without immediately revealing its intentions. As we move deeper into the first act, the film focuses on the internal dynamics of the family, showing emotional distance between the parents and the quiet confusion of the children. And this grounding becomes essential because it gives weight to everything that follows, making the audience care about the characters before placing them in danger. The first major turning point comes when strange environmental changes begin to occur, such as unusual sounds at night, flickering lights, and objects seemingly shifting position without explanation. And while these moments are subtle, they build tension effectively, making the viewer feel that something larger and more dangerous is approaching. As the story progresses into its second phase, the film introduces its central mystery more directly, as the neighborhood begins to physically change in ways that defy logic, with familiar surroundings slowly transforming into something unfamiliar and threatening. And it is during this stage that the first glimpse of prehistoric creatures is revealed, not in a dramatic or explosive way, but rather through brief, almost hidden appearances that leave both the characters and the audience questioning what they just saw. This restrained introduction of the creatures adds to the film's suspense, as it avoids immediate spectacle in favor of psychological tension, and when the creatures finally appear more clearly, their presence feels more impactful because of the build-up that precedes them. The narrative then shifts into survival mode, as the family and their neighbors are forced to confront the reality of their situation, and the film begins to explore how different characters react to fear, uncertainty, and the breakdown of normal life, with some trying to maintain order and logic while others descend into panic or denial. The middle section of the film is filled with a series of intense and emotionally charged scenes where the family must navigate both external threats and internal conflicts. And this dual tension is one of the film's strongest elements, as it shows that survival is not just about escaping danger, but also about maintaining trust and unity under pressure. There are several standout sequences during this portion, including a nighttime encounter with a massive creature that forces the family to hide and remain silent for an extended period, creating a slow-burning tension that feels almost unbearable, and another scene where the characters attempt to move through a transformed part of the neighborhood, only to realize that the environment itself is no longer stable or predictable, adding a layer of psychological horror to the physical danger. Never fully explains everything, choosing instead to leave certain aspects ambiguous, which adds to the film's mysterious tone but may frustrate viewers who prefer clear answers. In the later stages of the film, the story builds toward its climax, where the family is pushed to their limits both physically and emotionally, and the pacing becomes more intense, with quicker scene transitions and more direct confrontations with the creatures, creating a sense of urgency that contrasts with the slower, more deliberate pacing of the earlier acts. One of the most impactful elements of this section is how the film uses its characters' emotional arcs to drive the action, as moments of fear, sacrifice, and determination feel earned because of the development that has taken place throughout the story, and this helps the climax feel meaningful rather than just visually exciting. The final confrontation is not just about survival, but also about resolution, as the characters must come to terms with their situation and make difficult choices that will determine their future. And while the film delivers several intense and memorable moments during this sequence, it also maintains its focus on emotional storytelling, ensuring that the action never completely overshadows the characters. The ending of The End of Oak Street is deliberately ambiguous, leaving certain questions unanswered while providing enough closure to feel satisfying on an emotional level. And this approach aligns with the film's overall style, which prioritizes atmosphere and interpretation over straightforward explanations. Rather than offering a clear resolution, the film invites the audience to reflect on what they have seen and draw their own conclusions about the meaning behind the events, whether it is a commentary on family, survival, or the fragility of normal life. Overall, the scene-by-scene progression of the film is carefully constructed to build tension, develop characters, and maintain a sense of mystery. Even if its pacing and lack of clear answers may not appeal to every viewer, but for those who appreciate slow-burn storytelling and atmospheric cinema, it offers a deeply engaging and thought-provoking experience that stays with the audience long after the film has ended. As The End of Oak Street reaches its conclusion, the film leaves behind a complex impression that is both intriguing and somewhat divisive, making it a movie that is not easily categorized as simply good or bad, but rather one that depends heavily on the viewer's expectations and preferences. Directed by David Robert Mitchell, the film clearly aims to be more than just a typical science fiction survival story, instead presenting itself as a layered exploration of human emotions, family dynamics, and the fragility of normal life when faced with the unknown. And this ambition is both its greatest strength and its most noticeable weakness. Throughout the film, there is a strong emphasis on themes such as fear of change, the breakdown of reality, and the importance of family unity in times of crisis. And these themes are woven into the narrative in a way that often feels subtle and symbolic, rather than direct or obvious, which can be deeply rewarding for viewers who enjoy interpreting meaning and analyzing deeper layers within a story. The idea that a peaceful suburban environment can suddenly transform into a chaotic and dangerous world serves as a metaphor for how quickly life can change, and how unprepared people often are when faced with situations that challenge their understanding of reality. And this underlying message gives the film a sense of emotional depth that goes beyond its surface-level premise of prehistoric creatures appearing in a modern setting. From a performance standpoint, the film remains consistently strong, with Anne Hathaway delivering one of the most emotionally grounded performances in the movie, bringing a sense of realism and vulnerability that anchors the story. While Ewan McGregor provides a more restrained but equally important presence, portraying a character struggling to maintain control in an uncontrollable situation, and together their performances create a believable and relatable family dynamic that helps the audience stay invested even when the narrative becomes abstract or unpredictable. Supporting performances from Maisy Stella and Convery further strengthen the emotional core of the film, adding layers of innocence, confusion, and resilience that reflect different perspectives on the same crisis. And while some side characters feel underdeveloped, the main cast carries enough emotional weight to keep the story engaging. Visually, the film offers a mix of impressive and inconsistent moments, with certain sequences showcasing strong visual effects and creative design, while others reveal limitations in execution. And this inconsistency mirrors the film's overall structure, where high points are occasionally interrupted by weaker elements, preventing the movie from reaching its full potential as a polished, cinematic experience. One of the most interesting aspects of the film is how it handles its tone and pacing, as it deliberately avoids the fast-paced, action-heavy style that is common in many modern survival or sci-fi films, choosing instead to focus on slow tension-building, atmospheric storytelling, and character-driven drama. And while this approach helps create a unique identity and allows for deeper emotional exploration, it also makes the film feel uneven at times, especially for viewers who expect a more traditional narrative structure with clear progression and resolution. The ambiguous ending in particular is likely to be one of the most debated elements of the film, as it refuses to provide clear answers about the cause of the events or the ultimate fate of the characters, instead leaving much as a bold artistic choice that encourages discussion and reflection. It may also feel unsatisfying for those who prefer closure and concrete explanations. This divide in audience reception is a key factor in determining whether the film will resonate with the viewer, as it requires a certain level of patience and openness to unconventional storytelling. In order to be fully appreciated, when it comes to the question of whether the film is worth watching, the answer ultimately depends on what you are looking for in a movie experience. If you enjoy films that prioritize atmosphere, emotional depth, and creative storytelling over straightforward action and clear answers, then The End of Oak Street is definitely worth your time, as it offers a unique and thought-provoking experience that stands out from more conventional entries in the genre. On the other hand, if you prefer fast-paced, tightly structured films with clear narratives and consistent execution, you may find this movie frustrating or difficult to fully engage with, as its slow pacing, tonal shifts, and lack of definitive explanations can make it feel uneven and at times confusing. In terms of overall quality, the film can be described as a bold but imperfect work, one that takes risks and attempts to do something different, even if it does not always succeed in every aspect. And this willingness to experiment is something that deserves recognition, especially in a genre that often relies on familiar formulas. In conclusion, The End of Oak Street is a film that will likely divide audiences but also leave a lasting impression on those who connect with its style and themes, offering a mix of strong performances, creative visuals, and deep emotional undertones that make it a memorable, if not entirely flawless, cinematic experience. And while it may not appeal to everyone, it stands as an example of ambitious filmmaking that prioritizes originality and atmosphere over mainstream appeal, making it a worthwhile watch for viewers who are open to something different and are willing to engage with a story that challenges expectations and invites interpretation rather than simply providing answers. At its core, The End of Oak Street is not just a science fiction survival film filled with prehistoric creatures and chaos, but a deeply symbolic story about the fragility of human life, the illusion of control, and the importance of emotional connection in times of crisis. Directed by David Robert Mitchell, the film uses its unusual premise to explore a powerful moral truth. The life we believe is stable and secure can change in an instant, and only our relationships and inner strength truly define our ability to survive. The story begins in a peaceful suburban environment, representing comfort, routine, and the illusion of safety. But as the narrative progresses, this normal life is suddenly disrupted by forces that cannot be explained or controlled, symbolizing how unpredictable reality truly is. This transformation from order to chaos is not just a plot device, but a reflection of real-life situations where people are forced to confront unexpected challenges, whether they are personal, emotional, or societal. And the film suggests that in such moments, external stability becomes meaningless, and what truly matters is how individuals respond internally. The family at the center of the story, portrayed by actors like Anne Hathaway and Ewan McGregor, represents different emotional reactions to the same crisis, showing that survival is not just about physical strength or intelligence, but about resilience, trust, and the ability to adapt to change. One of the key moral ideas presented in this part of the story is that fear is not the real enemy. Fear of the unknown is, and the more characters resist accepting their new reality, the more they struggle to survive within it. The film subtly suggests that human beings often rely too much on structure, logic, and predictability, but when those systems collapse, it is emotional intelligence, cooperation, and adaptability that become the most valuable tools for survival. Additionally, the appearance of prehistoric creatures can be interpreted as a metaphor for primal fear and the raw, uncontrollable forces of nature, reminding the audience that no matter how advanced or civilized society becomes, there are always elements beyond human control. This idea reinforces the moral that true strength lies not in controlling the world, but in learning how to live within its uncertainties. Overall, the first layer of the film's moral message focuses on breaking the illusion of safety and teaching that life's unpredictability is inevitable, and those who accept change and rely on human connection are far more likely to endure than those who cling to the idea of control. A deeper layer of the moral in The End of Oak Street focuses on family, relationships, and emotional survival, emphasizing that in times of extreme crisis, human connection becomes more important than anything else. While the film presents external threats in the form of chaos and prehistoric danger, its real emotional conflict lies within the family itself, where misunderstandings, emotional distance, and unspoken tensions already exist before the disaster begins. And this is a crucial part of the story's message. Through the performances of Anne Hathaway and Ewan McGregor, the film shows that survival is not just about escaping physical danger, but about learning how to communicate, trust, and support one another when everything else falls apart. One of the strongest moral ideas presented here is that a family is only truly strong when its members are emotionally connected, and when those connections are weak, even the smallest crisis can feel overwhelming. But when those bonds are rebuilt, even the most impossible situations can be faced with courage and unity. The children in the story, represented by Maisy, Stella, and Convery, play an important role in highlighting this theme, as they reflect innocence, fear, and adaptability, often reacting more honestly to the situation than the adults, who struggle with denial and control. And this contrast suggests that sometimes emotional clarity comes from vulnerability rather than strength. The film also explores how crisis can act as a mirror, forcing people to confront truths they have been avoiding, and in this case, the dangerous and unpredictable environment pushes the family to face their own emotional fractures, making them realize that survival is not just about staying alive, but about staying connected. Another important moral idea in this part is that love is not proven in comfort, but in struggle, and the film demonstrates that real care and responsibility emerge when characters are forced to make difficult choices for one another, often putting others' safety above their own. At the same time, the story warns that isolation, both physical and emotional, can be just as dangerous as the external threats, as characters who separate themselves or fail to trust others are more likely to break under pressure. Overall, this part of the moral message reinforces that while the world around us may become unpredictable and dangerous, the relationships we build and maintain are what give us the strength to endure, and in the face of fear and uncertainty, unity, empathy, and emotional honesty become the most powerful tools for survival. Another powerful layer of the moral in The End of Oak Street revolves around fear, chaos, and human psychology, showing how people react when they are pushed beyond their comfort zones and forced to face the unknown. Under the direction of David Robert Mitchell, the film carefully explores the idea that fear is not just an external force, but an internal condition that can either destroy or transform a person, depending on how it is handled. As the strange events escalate and prehistoric creatures begin to appear, the characters are not only fighting for physical survival, but are also battling their own minds as panic, denial, confusion, and desperation begin to take control of their decisions. One of the key moral messages here is that chaos reveals true character, because when the structure of normal life disappears, people can no longer hide behind routines, social roles, or expectations, and instead their true nature comes to the surface. Some characters respond to fear with courage and adaptability, learning to accept the new reality and act accordingly, while others become paralyzed, irrational, or even selfish, showing how fear can break down logic and morality if it is not controlled. The film suggests that the real danger is not always the creatures or the environment, but the human tendency to lose control when faced with uncertainty, and this idea is reflected in how different individuals within the story react in completely different ways to the same situation. Through the emotional performances of actors like Anne Hathaway and Ewan McGregor, the narrative highlights how fear can either divide people or bring them closer together, depending on whether they choose to act out of panic or understanding. Another important moral lesson presented here is that acceptance is the first step towards survival, as characters who continue to deny the reality of their situation waste valuable time and make poor decisions, while those who accept the truth, no matter how terrifying it is, are able to think more clearly and adapt more effectively. The film also touches on the psychological impact of isolation and uncertainty, showing how prolonged exposure to fear can lead to emotional breakdown, mistrust, and even conflict within groups, reinforcing the idea that mental strength is just as important as physical strength in survival situations. Ultimately, this part of the story teaches that fear itself is not something to be eliminated, but something to be understood and managed. And those who learn to control their fear, remain calm under pressure, and think beyond immediate panic are the ones who are most likely to endure, making this psychological dimension one of the most meaningful and realistic aspects of the film's overall moral message. Another deeply meaningful layer of the moral in The End of Oak Street lies in its symbolism, particularly through the prehistoric creatures and the constantly shifting environment, which together represent forces far greater than the characters themselves. Under the creative vision of David Robert Mitchell, these elements are not just included for spectacle or excitement, but are used to communicate a powerful idea. Human beings are not as in control of the world as they believe, and nature, or reality itself, can overwhelm them at any moment. The appearance of prehistoric creatures can be interpreted as a manifestation of primal fear, instinct, and the ancient forces that have always existed beneath the surface of modern civilization, reminding the audience that no matter how advanced society becomes, there are still aspects of existence that cannot be predicted, controlled, or fully understood. This creates a strong moral message that progress and comfort often create an illusion of dominance over nature, but that illusion can be shattered instantly, forcing humanity to confront its vulnerability. The changing environment of Oak Street, where familiar surroundings become distorted and dangerous, further reinforces this idea by showing how quickly the known world can turn into something and the fragility of human perception. Through the experiences of characters portrayed by Anne Hathaway and Ewan McGregor, the film suggests that survival is not about conquering these forces, but about learning to coexist with them, adapt to them, and respect their power. And this is where the deeper philosophical meaning begins to emerge. Another important moral idea presented here is that human arrogance can be dangerous, as the belief that everything can be explained, controlled, or solved often leads to poor decisions when faced with something truly unknown, and the film challenges this mindset by presenting a situation where logic alone is not enough, and humility becomes essential. Additionally, the creatures themselves can be seen as reflections of the characters, internal struggles with their unpredictability, mirroring emotional chaos, fear, and suppressed instincts, suggesting that sometimes the greatest threats are not external, but exist within us. Overall, this part of the moral emphasizes that life is shaped by forces beyond human understanding, and instead of trying to dominate or deny them, true wisdom lies in accepting uncertainty, respecting the unknown, and finding balance within a world that is constantly changing, making this symbolic layer one of the most thought-provoking aspects of the film's message. As The End of Oak Street moves toward its conclusion, the moral of the story deepens into a more philosophical and introspective space, focusing on meaning, acceptance, and the human need to find purpose even in chaos. And this is where the film becomes less about survival in a physical sense and more about understanding life on an existential level. Under the direction of David Robert Mitchell, the narrative deliberately avoids giving clear answers about why the events are happening, and this ambiguity itself becomes part of the moral message, suggesting that life does not always provide explanations, and waiting for complete understanding can prevent us from moving forward. The film challenges the audience to accept that uncertainty is a natural part of existence, and that meaning is not something that is always discovered externally, but something that must be created internally through choices, relationships, and personal growth. Through the emotional journeys of characters portrayed by Anne Hathaway and Ewan McGregor, we see how individuals respond differently to the absence of answers, with some becoming frustrated or hopeless, while others begin to adapt, focusing less on why this is happening and more on how do we live through it. And this shift in mindset becomes one of the most important turning points in the moral arc of the story. Another key idea explored here is that acceptance is not the same as giving up, but rather a form of strength, where characters acknowledge, in its final moral layer, the end of Oak Street brings together all its themes: uncertainty, fear, family, survival, and meaning into a powerful and reflective conclusion that ultimately speaks about what it truly means to be human in an unpredictable world. Guided by the vision of David Robert Mitchell, the film leaves the audience with a message that goes beyond its science fiction premise, suggesting that life is not defined by how much control we have, but by how we respond when control is taken away. Through the emotional journeys of characters played by Anne Hathaway and Ewan McGregor, the story emphasizes that true strength does not come from physical power or intelligence alone, but from emotional resilience, adaptability, and the willingness to face reality without denial. One of the most important final moral lessons is that change is inevitable, and resisting it only creates more suffering, while accepting it, even when it is frightening or painful, opens the door to growth and transformation. And this idea is reflected in how the characters evolve from confusion and fear into a state of understanding and action. The film also reinforces the belief that human connection is the most valuable force in times of crisis, showing that even when the world becomes dangerous and uncertain, relationships built on trust, empathy, and sacrifice can provide meaning and strength that no external stability can offer. Another key takeaway is that uncertainty is not something to be feared, but something to be lived with, as the absence of clear answers does not make life meaningless, but instead challenges individuals to create their own sense of purpose through their choices and actions. The ambiguous ending of the film further supports this idea, reminding the audience that closure is not always necessary for understanding, and that sometimes the most important lessons come from learning to exist within unanswered questions. Additionally, the film subtly critiques the human desire for control and certainty, suggesting that this desire can lead to frustration and fear when reality does not align with expectations, and that true peace comes from accepting the limits of our understanding while still choosing to move forward. In the end of Oak Street delivers a moral that is both simple and profound. We cannot control the world, but we can control how we face it, and in doing so, we discover who we really are. It is a story that encourages reflection, resilience, and emotional honesty, leaving the audience with a lasting impression that survival is not just about staying alive, but about living with courage, connection, and meaning even in the face of the unknown. The story of the end of Oak Street begins in a calm, ordinary suburban setting, where the Platt family, Denise, Greg, and their 2 children are living what appears to be a normal life. But beneath this surface, the film quietly establishes emotional tension within the family, hinting that their lives are already unstable even before the main event begins. The neighborhood is presented with a nostalgic 1980s tone, filled with routine, familiarity, and a sense of safety. But the director, David Robert Mitchell, uses subtle cinematic techniques to create unease, such as long, silent shots, still environments, and background details that feel slightly unnatural, suggesting that something is about to change. As the opening scenes progress, small disturbances begin to appear, strange sounds, unusual heat, flickering electricity, and a general sense that the environment is behaving differently. Yet the characters initially ignore these signs, assuming everything is normal, which reflects a key theme of the film. People often fail to recognize danger until it is too late. The Guardian, +1. The turning point of the opening act comes during a quiet night when the entire neighborhood suddenly loses power, and what follows is not just darkness, but an unnatural silence, as if the world beyond their street has disappeared, creating a moment of confusion and fear among the characters. who still do not fully understand what is happening. By the next morning, the situation becomes far more disturbing, as the family steps outside and realizes that while their street remains intact, everything around it has changed completely. There are no nearby cities, no familiar roads, only strange landscapes filled with dense forests, extreme heat, and an environment that feels ancient and hostile. This moment reveals the film's central concept. A mysterious cosmic event has uprooted their entire neighborhood and transported it to an unknown location, cutting them off from reality and forcing them into a completely new world. Wikipedia +1. As the characters begin to explore their surroundings, the tension rapidly escalates, and the film carefully builds suspense by showing environmental dangers, before introducing direct threats, such as strange sounds echoing in the distance and signs of movement that cannot be explained, making both the characters and the audience feel constantly on edge. The first major shock arrives when a prehistoric creature is briefly seen, not fully revealed, but enough to create fear and disbelief. And when the reality of the situation becomes clear, panic sets in, forcing the family to run and seek safety. This moment marks the complete transformation of the film from a slow mystery into a survival story, where the characters must now face not only the unknown environment, but also deadly creatures that exist beyond their understanding. Houston Chronicle. By the end of this opening section, the film establishes its core conflict. A normal family is now trapped in a prehistoric, dangerous world where survival depends on adaptation, unity, and quick thinking. And this transition is handled in a gradual and effective way, moving step by step from normal life to confusion and finally to fear, making the impact of the story much stronger. The opening scenes are not just about introducing the plot, but about setting the emotional and psychological tone of the film, showing how quickly reality can collapse and how unprepared people are when faced with something completely beyond their control, which becomes the foundation for everything that follows in the story. As the story of the end of Oak Street moves forward from the shocking reveal of the prehistoric world, the film immediately shifts into a far more intense and chaotic phase, where confusion turns into panic and survival becomes the only priority. For the characters, after witnessing the first glimpse of a creature, the Platt family rushes back into their house, trying to process what they have just seen. But before they can even fully understand the situation, the outside world begins to feel more dangerous with every passing moment. The silence that once felt mysterious now becomes threatening, as strange sounds echo from different directions, including distant roars, heavy footsteps, and movements that suggest they are no longer alone in this environment. This aligns with the film's core premise, where a normal suburban neighborhood has been suddenly placed into a prehistoric setting filled with unknown dangers, forcing ordinary people into extraordinary circumstances. Screen-wise, +1. Inside the house, the family dynamic begins to crack under pressure. Denise tries to stay calm and protect her children, while Greg attempts to rationalize the situation, looking for logical explanations even though nothing around them makes sense anymore. This emotional divide becomes more visible as fear starts to control their reactions. One wants to act immediately, the other wants to think first, and this tension reflects how people respond differently to crisis. Meanwhile, the children react with a mix of fear and curiosity, often noticing things that the adults ignore, which becomes important as the situation escalates. Outside, other neighbors begin to panic as well, and the once peaceful Oak Street turns into a place of chaos, with people running, shouting, and trying to understand what is happening. The film highlights how quickly society can break down when structure disappears, showing that even a small, tight-knit community can collapse under extreme stress. The first major attack sequence happens soon after, and this is where the film fully embraces its survival horror tone. A group of prehistoric creatures enters the neighborhood, moving between houses, destroying property, and attacking anything in their path. These creatures are not introduced in a slow or symbolic way anymore. They are direct, physical threats, and their presence changes the pacing of the film completely. The camera movement becomes faster, the editing more intense, and the sound design louder, creating a sense of urgency that was missing in the earlier, slower scenes. Some neighbors attempt to fight back using whatever tools they have, guns, tools, or improvised weapons, but most are unprepared, and the result is chaos rather than resistance. This reflects another important idea in the film. Modern life does not prepare people for primal survival, and when faced with raw danger, many struggle to adapt. One of the most impactful elements of this section is how the film shows the consequences of panic. Characters who act without thinking often put themselves in greater danger, while those who take a moment to observe and adapt have a better chance of surviving. This creates a contrast between impulsive reactions and calculated decisions, reinforcing the idea that survival is not just about strength but about awareness and control. The Platt family, although terrified, begins to learn this lesson quickly, staying together and moving cautiously rather than rushing into danger. Their house becomes a temporary safe space, but even that safety feels fragile as the creatures continue to move through the neighborhood, reminding them that nowhere is truly secure. As the chaos spreads, the film expands its focus beyond the family, showing different neighbors reacting in different ways. Some try to escape the area only to realize that there is no clear path out, as the surrounding environment is completely unfamiliar and dangerous. Others attempt to hide, locking themselves inside their homes, hoping the danger will pass, while a few try to take control and organize others, though these efforts often fail due to lack of coordination and increasing fear. This variety of reactions adds realism to the story, showing that there is no single way people respond to crisis, and that survival often depends on both luck and decision-making. The sense of community that existed at the beginning of the film begins to disappear, replaced by isolation and mistrust. As people focus on their own safety rather than working together, another key moment in this part of the story is when the family realizes that the environment itself is as dangerous as the creatures. The heat becomes more intense, the air feels different, and the landscape beyond their street appears unstable and unpredictable, suggesting that they are not just in a different place, but in a completely different ecosystem. This reinforces the idea that they have been removed from their world entirely and placed somewhere that does not follow the same rules. The realization that there is no easy escape increases the emotional weight of the situation, as the characters begin to understand that this is not a temporary problem, but a long-term fight for survival. As night begins to fall, the tension reaches another level. Darkness makes the environment even more dangerous, as visibility decreases, and the sounds of creatures become more frequent and more intense. The film uses this shift to create a sense of vulnerability, as the characters can no longer rely on sight and must depend on instinct and trust. Inside the house, the family prepares for the worst, blocking entrances, gathering whatever resources they have, and trying to stay quiet, knowing that any noise could attract attention. This nighttime sequence is one of the most suspenseful parts of the film, as it combines fear of the unknown with the immediate threat of attack, keeping both the characters and the audience on edge. By the end of this section, the situation has fully escalated into a survival scenario. The characters are no longer questioning what is happening. They are focused on staying alive. The transformation from normal life to chaos is now complete, and the film has firmly established its central conflict: a group of ordinary people trapped in an extraordinary and deadly world, forced to adapt quickly or face the consequences. The neighborhood that once represented safety and routine has become a battlefield, where every decision matters and every mistake can be fatal. This part of the story is crucial because it sets the tone for everything that follows, shifting the narrative from mystery to action and survival. and preparing the audience for even more intense and emotionally driven moments in the next stages of the film. As the end of Oak Street moves deeper into its story, the film shifts from pure survival chaos into a more emotionally intense and character-driven phase, where the danger outside begins to reflect the emotional fractures within the family itself, and this is where the narrative becomes much more layered and meaningful. After the initial attacks and destruction in the neighborhood, the Platt family, already shaken and traumatized, begins to realize that staying in one place is no longer a safe option. As the creatures continue to move unpredictably, and the environment itself becomes increasingly unstable, with extreme heat, unfamiliar terrain, and constant threats surrounding them. The film reinforces this idea that their suburban world has been completely displaced into a prehistoric ecosystem, where survival depends not only on avoiding creatures but also on adapting to an entirely new reality that follows different rules. As they begin to move outside more frequently, searching for supplies and trying to understand their surroundings, the tension between Denise and Greg becomes more intense, revealing deeper personal conflicts that existed even before the disaster. Their arguments are no longer just about survival decisions, but about trust, honesty, and unresolved issues from their past, and this emotional conflict becomes one of the central driving forces of this part of the film. Denise pushes for action, gathering resources, moving strategically, and preparing for long-term survival, while Greg initially leans toward caution and denial, wanting to believe that the situation might somehow return to normal. And this difference in mindset creates a constant clash between them. This reflects a larger theme in the film. Crisis does not create problems. It exposes them, and the prehistoric chaos around them acts as a catalyst that forces these hidden tensions into the open. At the same time, the children's storyline begins to expand, adding another layer to the narrative. Brian and Audrey, driven by fear but also curiosity and emotional vulnerability, start to experience the world differently than the adults. And during one of the most critical sequences in this section, they accidentally venture outside at night, either searching for something familiar or reacting to a moment of emotional impulse. This nighttime setting is extremely important because it heightens the sense of danger, as visibility is low and the sounds of creatures become more dominant, creating a constant feeling that something could attack at any moment. During this sequence, the siblings become temporarily separated from their parents, marking one of the first major turning points in the film, where the family unit is physically divided and the stakes immediately rise. This separation is not just a plot device. It serves a deeper purpose by showing how each character reacts when they are forced to survive independently. Brian, being younger, represents innocence and fear, often reacting emotionally and impulsively, while Audrey begins to show signs of maturity, taking on a more protective role and trying to think logically despite the chaos around her. Their journey outside exposes them to the harsh reality of this new world, including evidence of other neighbors who were not able to survive, reinforcing the idea that danger is constant and unforgiving. Meanwhile, they encounter another survivor, a neighbor who has lost their family and is emotionally broken, which adds to the psychological weight of the scene, showing how trauma can affect people in different ways and how quickly hope can turn into despair. In such an environment, back at the house, Denise and Greg realize that their children are missing, and this moment becomes one of the most emotionally intense points in the film so far, as panic replaces conflict, and their personal issues are temporarily set aside in favor of a shared goal, finding their children. This shift is important because it shows that, despite their differences, their bond as parents is still strong, and crisis can sometimes bring people together rather than push them apart. As they venture out to search for Brian and Audrey, they face one of the film's most intense sequences, where they are chased by a large prehistoric predator, forcing them into a confined space where they must rely on quick thinking and cooperation to survive. This scene acts as a symbolic turning point in their relationship, as they are forced to trust each other completely, and in doing so they begin to reconnect emotionally, revealing truths that they had been hiding from one another. Greg admits to personal failures and insecurities, while Denise expresses her frustration and fear, and this moment of honesty becomes a form of emotional release, allowing them to rebuild a sense of unity that had been missing at the beginning of the film. This aligns with the film's deeper theme that true survival is not just physical, it is emotional and relational, and without trust and communication, even the strongest individuals cannot endure long-term crisis. Meanwhile, the children's storyline intersects with this emotional arc when they finally reunite with their parents. But the reunion is not just a moment of relief. It also highlights how much they have changed in such a short time, as the experience has forced them to grow, adapt, and confront fear in ways they never had to before. The presence of another survivor joining their group adds a new dynamic, showing that survival may require forming new bonds and expanding beyond the traditional idea of family. And this reinforces the film's message that community, even in its smallest form, is essential for survival. As this part of the story comes to an end, the film introduces a new and mysterious element that shifts the narrative once. Again, a strange, unexplained anomaly or phenomenon that appears in the distance. Something that does not belong to the prehistoric world, but also does not resemble their original reality. This moment is subtle but extremely important, as it introduces the possibility that there may be a way out of their situation, or at least an explanation behind what has happened. And it sets up the next phase of the story where survival is no longer the only goal. Understanding and escape become just as important. By the end of the film has fully transitioned from chaos to emotional depth and then into a new stage of hope mixed with uncertainty, as the characters are no longer just reacting to danger, but beginning to think about the future and their place within this strange world. The family is no longer the same as they were at the beginning. They are more connected, more aware, and more prepared, but the challenges ahead are even greater, as the mystery deepens and the stakes continue to rise, setting the stage for the next major turning point in the film's narrative. As the end of Oak Street moves into its middle act, the narrative intensifies on both physical and psychological levels, pushing the characters into increasingly dangerous situations while also deepening the central mystery behind their displacement. Following the emotional reunion of the Platt family, the film wastes no time in raising the stakes, making it clear that their brief moment of relief is only temporary, as the environment around them becomes even more hostile and unpredictable. The group, now slightly larger with the addition of another survivor, begins to move more strategically, realizing that staying confined to their house is no longer a viable option, especially as resources begin to run low and the creatures continue to roam unpredictably through the neighborhood and beyond. This transition marks a shift from reactive survival to proactive decision-making, where the characters must now take calculated risks in order to secure food, water, and potential escape routes. As they venture further away from Oak Street, the film expands its world, revealing that the prehistoric environment is far more complex and dangerous than initially thought, with dense forests, unstable terrain, and signs of volcanic activity, suggesting that they are trapped in a region that is not only ancient but also constantly evolving. The cinematography during these sequences emphasizes scale and isolation, with wide shots showing the small group of survivors surrounded by vast, unfamiliar landscapes, reinforcing the idea that they are completely out of place in this world. During one of their supply missions, the group encounters a herd of massive herbivorous creatures moving through the area, and while these creatures are not immediately aggressive, their sheer size and unpredictable behavior create a tense situation, forcing the characters to remain hidden and move cautiously. This moment is important because it shows that not all threats are direct attacks. Sometimes danger comes from being in the wrong place at the wrong time, and survival requires awareness and restraint as much as courage. However, the relative calm of this encounter is quickly shattered when a larger predator appears, initiating one of the film's most intense and visually striking sequences. The group is forced to run, navigating through difficult terrain while being chased, and the chaos of the situation leads to another moment of separation, though this time it is brief and quickly resolved, highlighting how the characters have learned from their earlier mistakes and are now more capable of working together under pressure. The action in this sequence is fast-paced and relentless, combining practical tension with visual spectacle, and it serves as a reminder that despite their growing adaptability, the characters are still at a significant disadvantage in this environment. Amidst these escalating encounters, the film begins to place greater emphasis on the mysterious anomaly that was hinted at earlier, and this becomes the central focus of the group's long-term plan. From a distance, they can see an unusual phenomenon, something that does not belong to the prehistoric world, possibly a distortion in space or light that appears to pulse or shift in ways that suggest it may be connected to whatever brought them here. This anomaly becomes a symbol of both hope and uncertainty, as it represents a possible way out, but also something they do not fully understand. The decision to move toward this anomaly creates a new direction for the story, transforming the narrative from simple survival into a journey with a purpose. And this shift adds momentum to the film, giving the characters a goal that drives their actions forward. As they travel closer to this phenomenon, the emotional dynamics within the group continue to evolve. Denise and Greg, now more united after their earlier conflicts, take on clearer leadership roles, balancing caution with determination, while the children begin to show increased resilience and awareness, no longer reacting purely out of fear but actively contributing to the group's survival. The additional survivor introduces moments of tension as well, particularly in how trust is built and maintained within the group, as survival situations often bring out both cooperation and suspicion. And the film explores this balance carefully without turning it into unnecessary conflict. One of the most significant moments in this part of the film occurs when the group reaches a vantage point from which they can observe the anomaly more clearly, and this is where the mystery deepens in a major way. The phenomenon appears to distort the environment around it, bending light and space in unnatural ways, and there are brief hints that it may be connected to multiple timelines or realities, rather than a single event. This revelation shifts the film from a purely survival-based narrative into a more complex science fiction story, raising questions about whether the neighborhood has been transported to the past, an alternate dimension, or something even more abstract. Importantly, the film does not provide clear answers at this stage, choosing instead to build intrigue and keep both the characters and the audience uncertain. As this section progresses toward its conclusion, the group attempts to move closer to the anomaly, but their path is blocked by increasingly dangerous conditions, including unstable ground and a concentration of predatory creatures drawn to the area, possibly affected by the same phenomenon. This creates a natural barrier that prevents an immediate resolution, ensuring that the story maintains its tension and continues to build toward a larger climax. The final moments of this part are marked by a quiet but powerful scene, where the family pauses to reflect on their journey so far, acknowledging how much they have changed and how uncertain their future remains. And this moment of calm before the next storm reinforces, as the end of Oak Street enters its final phase, the narrative shifts into a high-stakes, emotionally charged journey toward the mysterious anomaly that has been looming in the distance. And this part of the film carefully combines intense survival action with deeper emotional and philosophical resolution. After reaching the vantage point and realizing that the anomaly may be their only chance of understanding what has happened or possibly escaping, the Platt family makes a decisive choice to move toward it despite the increasing dangers that surround the area, marking a turning point where fear is no longer controlling their actions and purpose begins to guide them instead. This decision reflects how much the characters have evolved, especially Denise and Greg, who now operate as a unified force, balancing leadership, protection, and emotional strength in a way that was missing earlier in the film. Their children, too, have transformed significantly, no longer reacting purely out of fear, but actively contributing to survival decisions, showing growth that mirrors the film's core theme of adaptation under pressure. As the group travels closer to the anomaly, the environment becomes more unstable and surreal, suggesting that they are entering a space where rules of reality are breaking down. The terrain shifts unpredictably, the air feels heavier, and the sounds of the creatures become distorted, almost as if the anomaly is affecting not just space, but perception itself. This creates a sense of disorientation that heightens tension, as the characters are no longer sure what is real and what is not, and this psychological uncertainty adds another layer of danger beyond the physical threats they have been facing. During this journey, the group encounters one of the most intense sequences in the film, a large-scale confrontation with multiple prehistoric predators that appear to be drawn toward the anomaly, possibly reacting to its energy or influence. This sequence is chaotic and relentless, forcing the characters to rely on everything they have learned so far, including teamwork, quick decision-making, and emotional trust, and it serves as a culmination of the survival skills they have developed throughout the story. In the middle of this confrontation, a critical sacrifice occurs, where the additional survivor who had joined their group earlier chooses to stay behind in order to distract the creatures, allowing the family to escape and continue their journey. This moment is emotionally powerful because it highlights the film's recurring theme that survival is not just about individual strength, but about collective effort and sacrifice, and it reinforces the idea that even in a world filled with fear and chaos, acts of courage and selflessness can still exist. The impact of this loss is felt deeply by the family, especially the children, who are forced to confront as they finally reach the immediate vicinity of the anomaly. The film transitions into a more surreal and introspective tone, where the intense action gives way to a quieter but more psychologically complex atmosphere. The anomaly itself is revealed more clearly as a shifting, unstable phenomenon that bends light, distorts sound, and seems to exist outside normal time and space, creating an almost dreamlike environment where fragments of different realities appear to overlap. In this space, the characters experience brief, fragmented visions, glimpses of their past lives, memories, and possibly alternate versions of themselves, suggesting that the anomaly is not just a physical gateway, but also a reflection of their emotional and psychological states. This moment blurs the line between science fiction and metaphor, raising questions about whether the entire experience is purely external or partly internal, shaped by the characters' fears, regrets, and desires. The emotional climax of the film occurs when Denise and Greg are forced to make a critical decision about whether to enter the anomaly, despite not knowing what lies on the other side, and this decision becomes symbolic of the film's central message about acceptance and uncertainty. Rather than waiting for answers or guarantees, they choose to move forward together, trusting each other and prioritizing their family above all else. And this moment represents the culmination of their character arcs, where fear is replaced by acceptance and hesitation by action. The children standing beside them reflect this same growth, showing that they are no longer the same individuals they were at the beginning of the film, but have been shaped by their experiences into stronger, more aware versions of themselves. As the film approaches its final moments, the family steps into the anomaly, and the visual and auditory experience becomes increasingly abstract, with the environment dissolving into light, sound, and fragmented imagery, leaving the outcome intentionally ambiguous. The film does not clearly show whether they return to their original world, move into another reality, or remain trapped in a different state of existence. And this lack of resolution is a deliberate choice that aligns with the film's broader themes, Instead of providing a definitive answer, the story focuses on the emotional resolution. The fact that the family has faced their fears, resolved their conflicts, and chosen to move forward together despite uncertainty. By the end of the film, has built a powerful and thought-provoking climax that combines action, emotion, and philosophical depth, leaving the audience with a sense of closure on a character level, while maintaining mystery on a narrative level. And this balance between resolution and ambiguity becomes one of the defining characteristics of The End of Oak Street, setting the stage for its final interpretation and thematic conclusion. As The End of Oak Street reaches its final moments, the film deliberately moves away from clear answers and instead embraces ambiguity, focusing on emotional resolution rather than logical explanation. And this is where its deeper meaning truly comes into focus. Directed by David Robert Mitchell, the ending is not designed to tell the audience exactly what happened, but to make them reflect on why it happened and what it means for the characters. When the Platt family steps into the anomaly, the film transitions into a surreal and almost abstract sequence, where time, space, and reality begin to dissolve into fragmented visuals, flashes of their past, life on Oak Street, distorted memories, and glimpses of what could be alternate versions of their reality, suggesting that the anomaly is not just a physical gateway, but something much more complex, possibly a convergence of timelines, emotions, or even consciousness itself. The film intentionally avoids confirming whether they are traveling through time, entering another dimension, or experiencing a psychological transformation. And this lack of clarity becomes the central point of interpretation. What matters most in this ending is not where the family goes, but who they have become by the time they make that final step. Throughout the story, the characters, especially Denise and Greg, have evolved from emotionally distant individuals into a united force, capable of trust, sacrifice, and acceptance. And the decision to enter the unknown together symbolizes their growth and willingness to face uncertainty without fear. The performances of Anne Hathaway and Ewan McGregor give this moment emotional weight, as their expressions reflect both fear and calm determination, showing that they no longer need certainty to move forward. The children standing beside them represent the future and the idea that adaptation and resilience are learned through experience, reinforcing the film's message that growth often comes from the most difficult situations. In the final visual moments, the film offers subtle hints rather than direct answers, brief flashes of a familiar suburban street mixed with a strange prehistoric environment, and then a fading light that leaves the outcome unresolved. Some interpretations suggest that the family may have returned to their original world, while others argue that they have entered a completely new reality or that the entire journey represents a metaphorical transformation rather than a literal one. The film leaves all these possibilities open, encouraging the audience to form their own understanding rather than providing a single definitive conclusion. Ultimately, the ending of The End of Oak Street reinforces the film's core message. Life is unpredictable, and true strength lies not in controlling what happens, but in how we respond to it. The anomaly represents the unknown future that everyone must eventually face, and the character's choice to step into it together symbolizes acceptance, courage, and trust. The story suggests that while humans may never fully understand the forces that shape their lives, they can still find meaning through connection, resilience, and the willingness to move forward despite uncertainty. This makes the ending both emotionally satisfying and intellectually engaging, as it closes the character's journey while leaving the larger mystery open. In conclusion, The End of Oak Street is not just a survival story about a family trapped in a prehistoric world, but a deeper exploration of fear, change, and human connection. And its ending reflects this by prioritizing emotional truth over narrative clarity. The film invites viewers to think beyond what they see on screen and consider the broader implications of its story, making it a thought-provoking and memorable experience that stays with audience long after it ends. Not because of what it explains, but because of what it leaves unanswered. Even after its ambiguous ending, the end of Oak Street continues to unfold in the viewer's mind, because the film is structured in a way that encourages interpretation rather than closure, and this is where its deeper meaning becomes even more significant. Under the direction of David Robert Mitchell, the story can be understood on multiple levels at once, not just as a literal survival narrative involving prehistoric creatures, but also as a symbolic journey that reflects human psychology, emotional transformation, and the fragile nature of reality itself. One of the most compelling interpretations is that the entire prehistoric world may not simply be a physical location, but a representation of a psychological or emotional state, where the characters are forced to confront their deepest fears, unresolved conflicts, and suppressed instincts. In this sense, the creatures are not just external threats, but manifestations of primal fear and chaos, representing the parts of human nature that are often hidden beneath the surface of civilized life. And when the structured world of Oak Street collapses, these hidden elements are brought into the open. From this perspective, the sudden shift from a calm suburban environment to a dangerous prehistoric world symbolizes the breakdown of illusion, the idea that the safety and control people believe in are often temporary and fragile. The neighborhood itself, with its routine and familiarity, represents order and predictability, while the prehistoric environment represents chaos, instinct, and the unknown. And the transition between the two reflects how quickly life can change when faced with unexpected events. This interpretation aligns with the emotional journey of the characters, especially Denise and Greg, whose relationship begins in a state of tension and disconnection, but evolves into one of trust and unity through the shared experience of survival. Their journey can be seen as a metaphor for personal growth, where the challenges they face force them to confront their weaknesses and become stronger, both individually and as a family. Another important layer of meaning lies in the concept of time and reality, which the film explores through the mysterious anomaly. The way the anomaly distorts space, light, and perception suggests that the story may not be confined to a single timeline or dimension, but instead operates within a more fluid and abstract understanding of reality, where past, present, and possible futures intersect. This idea is reinforced by the fragmented visions experienced by the characters near the end of the film, where memories and alternate scenarios appear to blend together, creating a sense that reality itself is unstable and subjective. Rather than providing a scientific explanation, the film uses this concept to emphasize a philosophical point, that human understanding of reality is limited, and that not everything can be explained through logic alone. The children in the story also play a crucial symbolic role, representing adaptability and the ability to accept change more easily than adults. While the parents initially struggle with denial and the need for control, the children are more open to experiencing the world as it is, even when it is frightening. And this contrast highlights an important theme about perspective. The film suggests that growth often requires letting go of rigid expectations and embracing uncertainty, something that younger characters are naturally more capable of doing. As the story progresses, the children's increasing confidence and awareness reflect the idea that resilience is built through experience, and that facing fear directly can lead to greater understanding. Additionally, the role of sacrifice in the story carries significant moral weight, particularly in the moment where another survivor gives their life to ensure the family's survival. This act is not just about heroism, but about the interconnectedness of human lives, showing that survival is rarely an individual achievement and often depends on the choices and actions of others. The film uses this moment to reinforce the idea that even in the most chaotic and dangerous situations, compassion and selflessness remain essential aspects of humanity, and that these qualities can provide meaning even in the face of loss. The ambiguity of the ending further strengthens these themes by refusing to offer a clear resolution, instead leaving the audience with questions that extend beyond the film itself. Did the family return to their original world, or did they move into another reality? Was the entire experience a physical event or a metaphorical journey? The film does not answer these questions, because its focus is not on the destination, but on the transformation that occurs along the way. By leaving the outcome open to interpretation, the story invites viewers to engage with its themes on a personal level, encouraging them to reflect on their own understanding of fear, change, and resilience. Ultimately, The End of Oak Street can be seen as a story about confronting the unknown, both externally and internally, and learning to move forward despite uncertainty. It challenges the audience to reconsider the idea of control, suggesting that true strength lies not in mastering the world, but in adapting to it and finding meaning within it. The film's layered narrative, combined with its emotional depth and symbolic elements, makes it more than just a survival story. It becomes a reflection on human experience itself, exploring how people respond to crisis, how they grow through adversity, and how they find connection and purpose in a world that is often unpredictable and beyond understanding. In conclusion, Pra serves as an extended interpretation of the film's deeper messages, showing that The End of Oak Street is not meant to be understood in a single, straightforward way, but rather experienced as a complex and thought-provoking journey that continues to evolve even after it ends. Its true impact lies in the questions it raises and the emotions it evokes, making it a film that stays with the audience long after the final scene. Not because it provides answers, but because it encourages reflection, interpretation, and a deeper appreciation of the uncertainty that defines both the story and real life. In its deepest layer, The End of Oak Street extends beyond cinematic storytelling and begins to mirror real-world human experience, turning its surreal narrative into a reflection of how people face sudden change, uncertainty, and emotional transformation in their own lives. Under the creative vision of David Robert Mitchell, the film's prehistoric chaos and mysterious anomaly can be interpreted not only as fictional elements, but as metaphors for real-life disruptions, moments when everything familiar collapses without warning, forcing individuals to adapt quickly or risk being overwhelmed. The sudden displacement of the suburban neighborhood into an unknown and hostile environment strongly parallels situations such as personal crises, global disruptions, or unexpected life changes where the sense of normalcy disappears overnight, leaving people confused, afraid, and searching for meaning. In this sense, the film's narrative becomes a symbolic representation of how humans cope with instability, highlighting that the emotional journey of the characters is just as important as their physical survival. One of the most powerful real-world parallels in the film is the breakdown of routine and control. At the beginning, Oak Street represents structure, predictability, and comfort, elements that people often rely on to feel secure. But once these are removed, the characters are forced to confront the reality that control is often an illusion. This idea resonates deeply with real life, where unexpected events can disrupt carefully planned lives, and individuals must quickly adjust to new circumstances. The film suggests that those who cling too tightly to the idea of control struggle the most, while those who accept change and adapt are more likely to find stability, even in unstable conditions. This lesson is reflected in the development of the Platt family, whose journey from denial and conflict to acceptance and unity mirrors the process many people go through when facing major life challenges. Another significant aspect of this part of the film is its exploration of resilience and emotional endurance. The characters are not portrayed as perfect or heroic in the traditional sense. Instead, they are flawed, vulnerable, and often uncertain, which makes their growth feel more realistic and relatable. Through their experiences, the film emphasizes that resilience is not about being fearless, but about continuing to move forward despite fear, and that strength is often built through struggle rather than comfort. This idea is particularly evident in how the children adapt to this situation more quickly than the adults, suggesting that flexibility and openness to change are key components of resilience. Their ability to accept the new reality without constantly comparing it to the past allows them to function more effectively, reinforcing the idea that letting go of what once was can be necessary for survival. The film also presents a subtle commentary on human connection and community. In the early stages, the neighborhood functions as a collective unit, but as the crisis unfolds, this unity begins to break down, replaced by isolation, fear, and mistrust. This shift reflects how easily social structures can collapse under pressure, and how quickly people can become disconnected when faced with survival instincts. However, the story also shows that rebuilding connection is possible even in the most difficult circumstances, and that cooperation and empathy can provide strength that individuals alone may lack. The formation of a smaller, tighter group around the central family highlights the importance of trust and shared purpose, suggesting that while large systems may fail, meaningful human connections can still endure. The mysterious anomaly, which remains unexplained even at the end, can also be interpreted as a symbol of the unknown future. Something reflects a universal human experience, the need to move forward without having all the answers. This idea reinforces the film's central message, that life is not about eliminating uncertainty, but about learning to live with it and find meaning within it. The anomaly's shifting, unstable nature suggests that the future is not fixed, but constantly evolving, shaped by choices, actions, and perspective. Another important layer of meaning in this final interpretation is the concept of transformation. By the end of the film, the characters are no longer the same individuals they were at the beginning. They have been changed by their experiences, shaped by fear, loss, and growth. This transformation is not presented as entirely positive or negative, but as a natural result of facing extreme circumstances. The film suggests that change is an inevitable part of life, and that resisting it can lead to stagnation, while embracing it can lead to growth and understanding. This message is particularly powerful because it reflects a truth that extends beyond the film itself, that people are constantly evolving, often in response to challenges they did not choose. The ambiguity of the ending further strengthens this interpretation by refusing to define the outcome in concrete terms. Instead of showing exactly what happens to the characters after they enter the anomaly, the film leaves their fate open, allowing the audience to project their own understanding onto the story. This approach emphasizes that the journey itself is more important than the destination, and that the lessons learned along the way are what truly matter. It also encourages viewers to reflect on their own experiences with uncertainty and change, making the film's impact more personal and lasting. In its most expansive and reflective dimension, the end of Oak Street ultimately evolves into a meditation on memory, identity, and the way human beings reconstruct meaning after experiencing events that cannot be fully explained or logically contained. Under the visionary direction of David Robert Mitchell, the film's final interpretive layer suggests that what we have witnessed may not simply be a chronological sequence of events, but rather a fragmented narrative shaped by perception, trauma, and emotional truth. This perspective opens up the possibility that the entire experience of Oak Street, its sudden displacement, the prehistoric world, the anomaly, and even the creatures can be understood not just as external reality, but as a layered psychological and existential journey where the characters are forced to reconstruct their understanding of themselves and the world around them. In this sense, the film becomes less about what happened and more about how it is remembered and processed, shifting the focus from plot to perception. One of the most compelling ideas in this final layer is that memory itself may be unreliable, and the fragmented visions seen near the anomaly suggest that past, present, and imagined futures are blending together in ways that challenge linear storytelling. The flashes of suburban life, mixed with the prehistoric chaos, create a sense that the characters are experiencing overlapping realities, where their memories are not stable but constantly reshaped by their current emotional state. This interpretation aligns with how trauma works in real life, where individuals often recall events in pieces, influenced by fear, regret, and personal meaning, rather than objective accuracy. The film subtly mirrors this psychological process, presenting a story that feels coherent on the surface but becomes increasingly abstract when examined more deeply, encouraging the audience to question whether what they are seeing is a literal sequence of events or a subjective reconstruction. Another important aspect of this part of the analysis is the exploration of identity under extreme conditions. Throughout the film, the characters are stripped of their roles, parent, neighbor, citizen, and are forced to redefine themselves in a world that no longer recognizes those identities. Denise and Greg, for example, begin the story as individuals defined by their past, choices, and unresolved conflicts, but as the narrative progresses, they are transformed into survivors, protectors, and ultimately partners who must rely on each other completely. This transformation highlights a key idea. Identity is not fixed, but shaped by circumstances, and in moments of crisis, people often discover aspects of themselves that they were previously unaware of. The prehistoric world, in this context, acts as a catalyst that removes societal structures and exposes the core of human nature, revealing both strengths and vulnerabilities. The concept of legacy also emerges strongly in this final interpretive layer, particularly through the perspective of the children. While the adults are burdened by memory and the desire to return to what was lost, the children represent continuity and the possibility of moving forward without being defined by the past. Their ability to adapt more quickly and accept the new reality suggests that legacy is not about preserving the past exactly as it was, but about carrying forward its emotional essence while allowing for change. This idea is reinforced by the family's final decision to step into the anomaly, which can be seen as an act of letting go, of accepting that the past cannot be fully restored and that the future must be faced with openness rather than resistance. The prehistoric creatures, which initially appear as purely physical threats, take on a more symbolic meaning in this context as well. They can be interpreted as embodiments of the development and production of the end of Oak Street, represent one of the most ambitious and creatively layered undertakings in modern science fiction cinema, shaped by the distinctive vision of David Robert Mitchell, who is widely known for blending genre storytelling with psychological depth and symbolic meaning. From the earliest conceptual stages, Mitchell approached the film not as a conventional monster or survival movie, but as a hybrid narrative that would merge science fiction, emotional drama, and philosophical exploration into a single cohesive experience. The initial idea reportedly stemmed from his fascination with the fragility of normal life, how quickly structured reality can collapse, and this core concept became the foundation for the story of a suburban neighborhood suddenly displaced into a prehistoric world. Rather than focusing solely on spectacle, Mitchell prioritized atmosphere, tone, and character development, ensuring that the film would resonate on both an emotional and intellectual level. During the screenplay development phase, Mitchell spent considerable time refining the narrative structure, aiming to balance clarity with ambiguity. The script was deliberately designed to avoid over-explaining the central mystery, allowing the anomaly and the prehistoric elements to remain open to interpretation. This approach required careful writing, as the story needed to feel grounded enough for audiences to follow, while still maintaining a sense of mystery that would provoke thought and discussion. The characters were written with strong emotional arcs, particularly the central family, whose internal conflicts were as important as the external dangers they faced. This dual-layer storytelling, where emotional drama runs parallel to survival action, became one of the defining features of the film's narrative design. Casting played a crucial role in bringing this vision to life, and the involvement of actors like Anne Hathaway and Ewan McGregor added significant depth and credibility to the project. Both actors are known for their ability to convey complex emotional states, which was essential for a film that relies heavily on subtle character development, as well as intense action sequences. Their performances were carefully guided to feel natural and restrained, avoiding exaggerated reactions in favor of realistic emotional responses to extraordinary situations. The younger cast members, including Maisy Stella and Convery, were also selected for their ability to portray vulnerability and resilience, contributing to the film's authenticity and emotional impact. Pre-production involved extensive planning, particularly in terms of world-building and visual design. The creative team faced the challenge of combining a familiar, suburban environment with a prehistoric landscape, ensuring that the transition between the two felt both believable and visually striking. Production designers worked to create detailed sets that could seamlessly integrate practical elements with digital enhancements, allowing the neighborhood of Oak Street to serve as a grounded starting point before being transformed into something surreal and otherworldly. Location scouting also played a key role, as the filmmakers sought environments that could realistically represent the vast, untamed landscapes required for the prehistoric setting, including forests, rocky terrains, and volcanic areas. The film's visual effects were a major component of the production, particularly in bringing the prehistoric creatures and environmental transformations to life. Instead of relying entirely on CGI, the production team adopted a hybrid approach, combining practical effects, animatronics, and digital animation to create more realistic and immersive visuals. This method allowed actors to interact with physical elements on set, improving performance authenticity while still achieving the scale and complexity required for the creatures. The VFX team focused on making the creatures feel grounded in reality, paying close attention to movement, texture, and behavior, ensuring that they did not appear overly stylized or artificial. The goal was to create a sense of danger that felt immediate and tangible, rather than purely fantastical. Cinematography was another critical aspect of the film's production, with the director and cinematographer working closely to establish a visual language that would support the story's themes. The early scenes were shot with a more stable, composed style, reflecting the order and predictability of suburban life, while later sequences adopted more dynamic camera movements. So that was the end of Oak Street, a film that goes far beyond a typical survival story and leaves us with questions that stay in our minds long after the movie ends. Directed by David Robert Mitchell, this movie isn't just about prehistoric creatures or a mysterious anomaly. It's about fear, change, and how people react when their world completely falls apart. With powerful performances from Anne Hathaway and Ewan McGregor, the film shows that real survival is not just physical, but emotional and psychological as well. From a normal suburban life to a terrifying prehistoric world, the journey of this family teaches us that we cannot always control what happens around us, but we can control how we respond to it. The movie leaves its ending open, allowing every viewer to interpret it in their own way, and that's what makes it truly unique and thought-provoking. If you enjoyed this detailed explanation, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep movie breakdowns. Tell me in the comments, what do you think really happened at the end?